There are some names in history that they hit different. They stand for dignity, endurance, transformation. And Nelson Mandela, that's one of those names. His journey wasn't just a story from a history book. It's more like a blueprint for courage. So today, we're not just looking back at the past. We're looking at a guide for how to face the impossible in our own lives. And this quote, man, it just gets to the core of everything, doesn't it? For him, these weren't just some nice words. This was his operating system. It was a philosophy that sees failure not as the end of the road, but as part of the road itself. This one idea, resilience, is the thread that weaves through his entire life. All right, let's dive in. To really get the man, you've got to get the world he was born into. A world that from the moment he was born tried to tell him who he could be, where he was allowed to go, and what he was allowed to dream. But even from his earliest days, he learned something profound, that real leadership wasn't about having power. It was about serving others. And that system, the one that screamed no at every turn, it had a name: apartheid. And let's be clear, this wasn't just segregation. It was a brutal, carefully designed legal machine meant to tear people apart, to crush their potential, and to silence anyone who dared to speak up. It was a world where your entire future was written into law, just because of the color of your skin. And really, this is what it all boiled down to, right? This one massive clash. On one side, you had the rules of the world saying you are a captive of this system. But on the other, you had Mandela's unwavering belief. No human is born to be a captive. He just flat out refused to accept the reality they tried to force on him. And that single decision, it would define everything that came next. But here's the thing, courage always has a cost, right? It's never free. His choice to fight for people whose voices had been completely stripped away was going to demand everything from him. He knew the risks, he saw the danger, and he made the choice anyway. And you can just see how his sacrifice escalated. He starts as an activist, choosing to fight for other people. Because of that, he becomes a fugitive, hunted down just for what he believed. And that ultimately made him a prisoner, locked away for the very same ideals that would one day set his nation free. 27. Just let that number sink in for a second. 27 years. That's almost 10,000 sunrises, every single one of them seen from behind steel bars. It's a staggering amount of time, a lifetime for some, and it was all designed to break his spirit. But you know what? They could lock up the man, but they could never, ever lock up the dream of a free nation he held inside his mind. So, what happens when a man finally walks out of a cage after 27 years? The world expected rage. It expected revenge. But Mandela? He chose something else entirely. He chose a path that nobody saw coming, a path that would change not just his country, but how the entire world thinks about strength. Think about it. He's standing there, faced with this massive choice. He could have walked down the path of bitterness, filled with hatred, ready to settle every single score. That was the easy path, the one everyone expected. But instead, he walked out with purpose. He chose resolve over bitterness. He wasn't there to get even with the past. He was there to rewrite the future. See, he just knew that you can't build real, lasting justice on a shaky foundation of revenge. Forgiveness for him wasn't some soft, weak idea. No way. It was the most powerful tool he had. It was how he would disarm his enemies and build a new, united South Africa from the ashes. And it wasn't just a philosophy, He put it directly into practice. When he became president, he didn't try to hoard power, he tried to give it back to the people. He brought his former enemies, the very people who imprisoned him, into his government. He worked tirelessly to heal the deep, deep wounds of his nation. He proved that the best leadership isn't loud and forceful, it's steady, it's service. So what can we take away from all this? Well, his life is practically a masterclass. He shows us that leadership is a sacrifice. It's not a fancy title. That real change isn't handed to you. It's earned. That freedom isn't a destination. It's a path you have to walk every day. Hope isn't something you just find lying around. It's something you have to create. And maybe the biggest lesson of all, your circumstances don't define who you are. Your decisions do. And this is where the whole story pivots, where it stops being just about him and starts being about us. Because his story is like a mirror, reflecting the prisons we all face. Maybe not prisons made of steel and stone, but prisons of fear, prisons of self-doubt, and the invisible chains we sometimes put on ourselves. His life is this incredible reminder that we too can break free. That torch he carried, that fight for a better reality, well, now it's in our hands. His story isn't just something to admire from a distance. It's a call to action. It's your moment to rise. So let me ask you, straight up, what are your prisons? Is it the fear that holds you back from trying something new? The doubt that whispers you're not good enough? The injustice in your own world that you've just kind of accepted as the way things are? Just naming it. That's the first step to breaking down the walls. And his life gives us the playbook for how to do it. First, you've got to forget about waiting for the perfect circumstances, because they're never coming. Second, ignore the need for applause. You don't need everyone to approve. Third, and this is a big one, stop waiting for permission. And finally, start with conviction. That deep, unshakable belief in what you're fighting for. That is where all power begins. So, rise. Rise after you stumble. Rise after you fail. Rise after every single moment that tries to tell you to stay down. The world doesn't need more people who shrink. It needs people who rise. Mandela rose for justice, for freedom, for all of humanity. And his legacy is asking you, right now, to rise for your own life, for your dream, for your purpose, for your own courage. Now, rise.